we are 11 days away from what seems like the longest presidential race in American history. I find it excruciating. Do you?
Exhausting.
Yeah. It's actually been one of the shortest.
I know. That's just crazy.
Right.
Between these candidates.
It's like she became candidate like what, 3 months ago?
She means the Trump part.
I know. Well,
Well,
last night, radio show host Charlamagne the God told CNN that the way they've been covering the campaign, isn't helping matters. No, watch.
I feel like I heard more on this network about is Kamala Harris black than I do about, Donald Trump being a fascist.
Well,
am I wrong, Angela?
Honestly, that's. I'm sorry.
Oh, I like that.
That's no,
Go
that
ahead,
is
Anderson.
no. I'm not. Look, I'm a huge fan of yours.
Okay.
But to say that we're sitting around discussing is Kamala Harris black, like
I've seen that. I've seen
that's
those roundtable
definitely
discussions
on.
a lot. Now
That's-
that Anderson, for you to say that y'all don't have those conversations.
I've never asked somebody is.
I'm not saying
Kamala
you.
Harris
I said the
black?
network.
He said the network.
I don't think anyone on. I don't think any anchor on this network has been going around saying, "Is she black?"
Y'all have never had a.
We have had. Look, I'm sure we have had, nutty people or people who have strongly held beliefs who I may disagree with, who somewhere on some panel have said something, but I will just speak up for what I do on the show. I do believe it's important to get people different viewpoints as long as they're willing to have a legitimate conversation.
I think no network has honest conversations about Donald Trump. Nobody's had honest conversations about Donald Trump since 2016.
How about letting the woman get a word in?
Yeah, I would like to hear from
So
Angela.
Charlamagne clearly doesn't watch The View because, right? Because other than this show, is he right about that most networks are covering these campaigns sort of like, as if it's a normal campaign? One person seems normal, the other person is admiring Hitler. Is that a normal campaign?
It's not only CNN, though. I think we can place that blame, across the board, not only cable news, but network news as well. I think really what happened here is that we had those 2 assassination attempts against the former president. And the message that was sent out across the board was, let's tone down the rhetoric. And in toning down the rhetoric, that silenced people that were calling him a fascist, a threat to society. That silenced factual information. Many of us still called him a fascist,
How come we
a
haven't
dictator
toned
on day one. But there has been sort of this silencing of factual information about the former president, and I think that benefited him greatly.
But we haven't toned down. How do you explain that?
I think.
Have you ever listened to directions? No, but this is where I disagree. And I'm a huge Charlamagne fan. I'm obviously a CNN contributor and love Anderson Cooper, but this felt a little rich to me. I mean, I can't even count the number of times I've been on CNN's airwaves saying he's dangerous, he's a threat to democracy, talking about my personal experience with him and what a second term would be like. Like, CNN isn't harsh enough on Donald Trump seems like a very rich take to me. And with respect to Charlamagne, he just did a very tough and smart town hall with Kamala Harris that I think helped her. I think answering tough questions helps her. And Anderson Cooper just did a tough town hall with her that I think is what candidates need to do. Donald Trump being a fascist and a threat to democracy, both of which are true, does not mean Kamala Harris shouldn't answer her plan for the Middle East.
Do they say to the public, Trump would not come on and do the same thing?
Yes, we said that repeatedly. I
every time.
sat next to Erin Burnett while she repeatedly said that the other night. The reason we're doing a town
Cooper
hall.
said it when he opened up the town hall. But look, this has been happening with Donald Trump since 2000. When was the day of infamy that he started running? 2015. Because people are always saying, you all in the media are chasing the shiny objects. But the problem is, how do you not report on the stupid things he says? And so when you report on the stupid things he says, you end up discussing things like, is Kamala Harris black? Not because we think it, but because he said it. I mean, we've talked about it on this table at least a couple of times, not because any of us think, we all know she's half black, but because he says stupid things, we've got to then go and discuss stupid things. And I absolutely think that Donald Trump is held to a different standard than, frankly, any normal human being.
That's right.
Yeah.
The conversation that we were having was a lot about whether the media is normalizing Donald Trump. I believe the voters normalized Donald Trump by electing him as the lead candidate for the Republican Party. That was the normalizing part. It is our job as the media, the fourth estate, to report, to be journalists, to give information, to fact check. Our job is not to decide who gets to hold the mic or not. That was on the voters. This is a democracy. That's the voters choosing that.
It's a democracy right now.
Right.
If he wins, it won't.
Yes. But the worst thing I think the media does do, though, is reduce or minimize the danger of Donald Trump by mocking him. In all seriousness, we have 1,000 things we can pick on Donald Trump for. False claims about immigrants, turning the military against its own people, denying election results continually. The January 6th.
Who's mocking him? Who's mocking him?
No, I'm saying all over.
I mock him constantly. Thank you very much.
Sheila,
I mean, I think I always say, if we're going to talk about Kamala being black, can we talk about Donald Trump being orange?
No. But I've got a greater point here, which is that it's not normalizing him. We're minimizing him by laughing at the jokes. We got completely played in 2016.
Arnold
the media
Palmer
absolutely
should not get as much attention as January 6th.
The media
just constantly
absolutely
fall into
played
that
into his
trap.
hand in 2016 by running a campaign for
That's
him.
the point, isn't it?
Well,
You
that
guys,
is
is
the point,
anyone
but I
listening
do
to me?
think
Seriously.
People want. Okay.
All right. Oh shoot! I thought that was the bell.
Well, because Belle isn't here.
Went for the bell and got a Tic Tac instead. But I think
what's your ultimate- Can we
my
get some
ultimate
Ativan
point
over
is
here?
that it's not the normalizing, which is not our job. Our point is to stick to the things that are very dangerous about Donald Trump. He makes himself a muppet, and he's crazy to make us laugh and cover those
But
stories.
I agree with you because I think a large part of what bothers some voters, not every voter, but it bothers some voters, is his tone. The fact that a president should not behave this way and should not be saying the things he's saying. And I think the reason that sometimes it's hard to stick with something, it's because it's like covering, somebody with verbal diarrhea. The man does not stop talking cosa.
And he
but
he traffics in identity politics. He traffics in demonizing
All
people.
those things we understand.
He traffics in otherizing. He's running on grievances. He stopped
So
the immigration
now-
bill and then is saying.
But if
every
everything is equal, then how come it's still 50-50?
Because, that's
I mean, he's
exactly
so
the point.
ridiculous at
There
this
are a
point.
lot of people in this country who think that if we just didn't platform him, we didn't play what he said, we didn't let his surrogates talk, he would go away. No, he won't. He's going to go on Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan has more listeners than any of the battleground states individually do. And by the way, Joe Rogan's a tough interview. I don't think he's going to let him breeze through it. But we need to realize, the media's job is to contextualize, ask tough questions. And on contextualizing, sure, I've had a laugh at the expense of Trump. Sometimes it is funny just to mock ridiculousness. But then we have to go back and say we've never been in a moment in American history where a chief of staff, a national security advisor, multiple secretaries of defense, countless senior officials who worked for him are saying this is the most dangerous president in our lifetime.
That's
what we need to be talking about.
Not enough networks are doing it. That's the bottom line.
I volunteer. I do it too.
He has gotten a break. I'm sorry. He has gotten a break because of his rhetoric, because of all the crazy stuff that
Well,
he says. He
unserious
just recently
candidate-
said something. Do we have that tape?
Yes, let's see the tape.
Yeah,
the media has been so worn down, I think, by Trump's crazy talk that they treat his rants as if he's normal. Okay, let's watch this.
A lot of people coming out of the Congo, not just South America, they're coming from 181 countries as of yesterday. Right, and we're a dumping ground. We're like a garbage can for the world. That's what's happened. That's what's happened to our. We're like a garbage can. It's the first time I've ever said that. And every time I come up and talk about what they've done to our country, I get angrier and angrier. First time I've ever said garbage can, but you know what? It's a very accurate description.
See,
He's an idiot. He's an idiot.
But that's
Come
what
on.
he does.
The guy is ridiculous.
That's what.
And by the way, can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I don't want to hear this from somebody who didn't even serve, okay?
Yes. Yeah, but the thing is, he's again demonizing immigrants. He is the one that tanked the border bill, okay? It was a bipartisan bill. He tanked it so that he could run on it and say things like that, garbage like that.
Oh.
But and just one more thing, the fear mongering is that immigrants are coming into this country undocumented and are taking black jobs, as if there is a black job, which the black job should be the president of the United States. But he's also, but he also is saying that immigrants are taking, Hispanic jobs and that they're hurting people. Statistics show that immigrants help our economy,
Right.
they pay taxes, and that they tend to be more law-abiding than people born here in the United
It's
States.
also just
so
a
it's all
dumb
lies.
point. He refers to people coming from 180 countries. There's like 192 in UN. That's most of the world he's talking about. That is what America is. We have always been a melting
Unless
pot
you're
of
a
people
Native
from all over.
American, you're
Literally,
it
unless
was
you're
built on the
indigenous to this
shoulders of
country.
immigrants
Well,
and
listen,
slaves.
Yeah, but he's not talking about. Listen, let's be clear
Yeah,
here.
he's not
a
talking
total
about
racist.
Slovenia. He's not talking about Yugoslavia.
He's not talking about Norway.
No, but
or
I'm saying
Sk-
he's
Denmark.
not.
Or
he's
Denmark or
it's
Sweden.
such an unpatriotic thing
but
to say this country
a
is
racist.
barbaric.
But okay, you know what? If immigrants come here and turn us into a garbage can, then let's look at the people that came from his family here.
Yeah.
You want to talk about garbage?
But he's the one who's turning. He's
I
the
don't know,
one.
but on that, if I can just say though, this is the problem though, is if we just demonize the other side and the 74 million people, you don't win hearts and minds.
We're
the way
talking
that
about him,
I know,
not
but
his
the way
followers
that you
right
defeat
now.
him, the way that you defeat him
Yeah,
this
give the
cycle
facts
is you
about
need
it.
to bring more
Give the
people into the
facts.
fold, and you need to yes, but that's where I think the name calling is actually not
At
helpful.
this point,
fascist, I think,
Alyssa,
is a
come on.
fact.
At this point, after everything he's said and done, you really think that these people are going to change their
I think that
tune?
there are people changing in real time. I know voters who are not voting for him this time who did in 2016 and 2020. I've never known
Well, where
so
have
many
their
lifelong
heads been all
Republicans.
this
But
time?
but when
can-
you say that, don't you think that makes people want to double down
and
on
the
it?
other thing is he can be as unserious as he wants. The coverage needs to be serious because
Yes.
there's enough serious stuff that we're dealing in
But we're not
that we need
talking
to.
about. You're not talking about Trump versus Romney here. You're not talking about two normal people.
But then you ask, in
So
your
it
next
hasn't-
breath, Joy, you say, why haven't people gotten it? We're not going to figure that out if we then say, well, they've got their head up their butt. Like, it's a numbers game to elect people. We need to get those
You
people.
win by addition, not subtraction.
Yeah.
So I'll take any Trump convert and I won't call you names.
Listen, I've been around a long time. We all know how old I am. I've never heard a presidential candidate speak highly of Hitler,
I know,
ever.
I know.
No, this is a disgrace. Like I said yesterday, my father was in World War II. My uncles fought in Germany. My uncle has a Purple Heart, okay? This guy has bone spurs and goes on television and demonizes people like my family. Screw you.